From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Conversations with African Poets and Writers. We're glad to see you all. Today, in addition to our featured speaker, we have His Excellency Ambassador Malangu from the Republic of South Africa. Let's give all of us a round of applause, please. Showcasing African writers whose work has contributed to increasing the knowledge about the continent of Africa and her people is the objective of the series, Conversations with African Poets and Writers. It's a partnership of the African Poets and Writers Division of the Library of Congress, the African and Middle Eastern Division, the Howard University, and the Africa Society, 4 partners. This unique opportunity that you will experience offers you the ability to peer into the richness and diversity and creativity of African writers. It will allow you to sort of peer into African life and culture. Now, all our past programs can be found on the Library of Congress website for your viewing. You're going to have a fantastic program today. Enjoy the program. We're headed to South Africa, a fabulous, rich country. So please silence your cell phones, as usual. You know all the housekeeping items, and engage your imagination and enjoy yourselves. And now I will invite Rob Casper, who is the head of the Poetry and Literature Center at the Library of Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. It's been a joy to work with you and to have you lead the summit as we continue this series, Conversations with African Poets and Writers. This is the beginning of our 6th year of the series. It's been a wonderful partnership with the Summit and with the African Middle East Division and the Poetry and Literature Center at the Library of Congress. I'll tell you a few things about the Poetry and Literature Center. We are the home to the U.S. Poet Laureate. Our current Poet Laureate, the 22nd, is Tracy K. Smith. We host programs like this all throughout the year with a number of divisions at the library. We're most delighted to partner with the next person who will get up here and tell you a little bit about the event and the whole division with this series. But if you want to find out more about our programs, you can visit www.loc.gov/poetry. This program and this series wouldn't exist without the great, wonderful support of Mary Jane Deeb, the chief of this division. It's so inspiring to be here among all these books and to think of the great authors we've had come through here and connect to us, champion the range of writing, diasporic and writing from the continent that we want to support and want to sort of get greater knowledge of. Big thanks to Mary Jane Deeb for doing that, and she'll come up here and welcome our next introducer, Mary Jane.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you, Patricia. I'm Mary Jane Deeb, Chief of the African Middle East Division, which is responsible for recommending, preserving, serving the collections of 78 countries, including the entire continent of Africa, the Middle East, Central Asia, the Caucasus, and for organizing programs such as the one today that highlight the contributions of writers from the countries and regions we represent. Our partners have been absolutely fantastic. The person you've just heard before, Robert Casper, the head of the Poetry Center, has been with us from the very beginning in funding this series. Patricia Bain, president of the Africa Society, has been with us the whole way from the very beginning. And Professor Mbe Cham is our newest partner from the University of Howard. Our series has become well-known and well-established and has brought to the library and to our patrons and readers, as well to all those who access the library's webcasts around the world, some of the best writers from Africa. From those who are no longer with us, like Chinua Achebe and Ali Mazrui, the Albert Schweitzer Professor of Humanities at Binghamton University, to poets laureate like poet Kigo Sitsil, the poet laureate, to the new generation of writers like Amadou Kone from the Côte d'Ivoire, Nigerian writer Igoni Barrett, the poet Omekonga Dibanga from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Tijan Salah, the Gambian poet, and so many more. And today we have with us a great poet, a great writer from South Africa, Antjie Krog. And she will be introduced by our partner in arms and the supporter and co-sponsor of this series, Professor Ambe Cham of Howard University. Ambe Cham.
Thank you, Mary Jane. Good afternoon. It's a distinct pleasure to be a partner in this very important series. My name is Mbai Cham. I'm a faculty member at Howard University in the Department of African Studies, and I'm also the director of the Title VI National Resource Center for African Studies, which is one of 10 Africa area studies Title VI funded by the Department of Education, U.S. Department of Education. It's my distinct honor to introduce Ms. Antjie Krog. Anna Elizabeth Antjie Krog's iconic status as one of South Africa's most popular, critically acclaimed, and politically courageous poets began when she was 18 with her first collection entitled Daughter of Jafta, 1970. Within the next 2 years, she published a second collection entitled January Sweet. Since then, she has published more than 10 volumes of poetry, much of which has dealt with love, apartheid, the role of women, and politics of gender, and has been translated into several languages, including English and Dutch. Krog started publishing prose in the 1990s, developing a unique form of autobiographical writing which combines factual and fictional and lyrical elements. The best known of these is her account of reporting on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission entitled Country of My Skull, 1998. Some of you may have seen the film version of that with Samuel Jackson. It was her first work to be published in English and brought her international recognition. She has also written a play, and I'm going to take a stab at this here in Afrikaans. Waarom is die wat wordt toi toi altijd zo wit? How did I do? I'm sure she'll probably provide the translation there. And this play was performed at the Arts Festival in South Africa in 1999. Antjie Krog has also been a journalist and edited for many years, the independent Afrikaan journal, De Zuid-Afrikaan, co-founded with Herman Guillaume in 1984. She also joined the South African Broadcasting Corporation, SABC, and for 2 years contributed to the radio program AM Live, which she reported on South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission. She's also an academic, having joined the arts faculty at the University of Western Cape in 2004. Krog's many works, both poetry and prose, have received almost every award available in her country for poetry, translation, and nonfiction, among them the esteemed Hertzog Prize for Lady Anne, 1989, and for Synapse, 2014, the Oliver Schreiner Prize and the Alan Paton Prize for Country of My Skull, 1998, and the Veta Poetry Award for Down to My Last Skin in 2000. Internationally, she has also been awarded the SOCOM Award for Hiroshima Foundation for Peace and Culture, as well as the Open Society Prize from the Central European University, previous winners of which were Jürgen Habermas and Václav Havel. Since 2004, Antjie Krog has been an extraordinary professor of literature and philosophy at the University of the Western Cape. Bucknell University Press is proud to be the publisher of the first English translation of Antjie Krog's Lady Anne, A Chronicle of Verse. It's a distinct pleasure to welcome her to here, the Library of Congress, and to this series. Thank you. Welcome.
Parole. I feel I lie because I blatantly indulge in words and useless eros. In the face of so much injustice, if poetry perseveres as luxury, it also becomes a lie. I live on the other side of injustice. Therefore, I have the time to tune chords precisely around the private gland, and why not? This country has already been ruined. Then the order comes. Words should be AK-47s, should always fight. Poetry should be usable, deed, relate the struggle, take sides. Weeds are mightier than roses. Tortured poetry grows wild in phonetic rain. How can I safeguard this poem against the stupidity of politics? Distressed I stand, looked upon with suspicion, my most ordinary words refused. But I'm ashamed by the poet's unheard of poetry, which screams on the other side of all breath. There, where your eyes stop now, gravel road, Spaza, someone may have disappeared before dawn. The wind moves as if in war. Children kick a ball in the townships where 3/4 of the world lives and waits, rightly so, for equality. Shy like you, brave or stupid, or perhaps already lazy and corrupt like us. From their hands hangs this treacherous carpet of hope and hunger and dream. But the poet stands aside. He hears of the petitions, motions of injustice. He has stopped writing poems, no poetry. The thoughtful poet stands smoke blue with cold. And barely audible, she repeats her arrest. Her sentences melt from her tongue, not in print, not in photographs, not in statistics. Everywhere it is damp. Rumors of disappearances, torture, and anonymous deaths. The struggle filters through with inaudible, fierce noises into the shady suburbs, and we have become a country of rumors. If my senses cannot wean the cries from the leaves, or the blood from the barricades of groceries, or pick up murder from the blockades near my desk, I will die hardened in the crossfire of pencil and paper, which always fight back to the truth. All the writers are dead, aren't they? They can't write about or of the oppressed, and the oppressed writer is drowning in anger. This is what's being said. Aesthetics is the only ethic. They say as well, but the demands do not tolerate neutral ground. Between evils, I choose nothing. I was born of a guilt of greed and scorn, where I felt myself at times apart, a hedge between myself and them, myself and the slaughter. Nothing ever prepared me for hunger and homelessness, landlessness. I tried to find a bridge, but everything is burning and I'm looking for a guide. Beware of propaganda, rhetoric, coarse change of words under the whip of lies, without even the charm of consciousness. Is aesthetics ever useful? I never stopped studying survival. With this fragile, most light-hearted category, I diligently investigate every relation to breathe. To breathe. Yes, to breathe. Language has never been useless or fake, but only. Although the poet may desire indulgence and the progression of political words, the injustice is real. And whatever I write, which will survive, sprouts from this very feudal clash between Luddite and lie. So to find the bridge, I try to find a metaphor in terms of Lady Anne Lindsay. In 1797, Lady Anne's husband, Andrew Barnard, was sent to the Cape of Good Hope as secretary to Lord Macartney, the first British governor of the Cape Colony. Barnard was given this post by the Secretary of War and Colonies, Henry Dundas. Lady Anne, who was well connected to both Dundas and the Prince of Wales, accompanied her husband and became the first lady of the colony in the absence of Lord Macartney's wife. Her letters and diaries are filled with acute observations and assessments of the situations and people she came across in and around the Cape during her period of residence, from 1797 to 1802. She also produced hundreds of drawings and paintings, of which most are in Balkera's house, her ancestral home in Scotland. So the volume opens with her on ship on her way to Cape Town. And it's a letter to Henry Dundas. Who is it that bloody well sends me downwards to the south to foreign soils? And above all, why? Fabricated from an abundance of stains and knobs, my highland origin always matters to me. Stony gaiters and mist, and intimacy there where water lists the only reflection. Like you, sir, I was purified for castles. On deck, under my blanket, my senses sting. I am suspended, grim swine, in the rigging of sound and salt. My fingers fondle blocks of umber, carmine, and new cinnabar, marked down by Newmans in London, to pound this wretched life of yours and mine into dignity, into blends of poetry and paint. Suddenly, out of the sea, slightly to one side, a parasol of crystal shimmering over skin of a whale. My husband fires his gun. A jet of bubbles vibrates thunderously from a spout. Will this whale surface furiously beneath the ship so that we tumble sucked into a vortex with blank-eyed animals, sails billowing underwater, wobbling deck, cannon snouts pointing upwards under fleeces of hair, mine a blonde combless fern or fin in a ring of roses slowly sinking to the dregs. But of course, I find her quite useless as a guide. I wanted to live a second life through you, Lady Anne Barnard. Show it is possible to hone truth with a pen, to live an honorable life within so much privilege. Weave a language of revolution and conspiracies, liberate slaves, clinically plunder royalty, and with your expedition through the interior, cleave the Boers to the bone. But from your letters you emerge, hand on the hip, talented, but a frivolous fool. Pen in crafty ink, snob, naive liberal, being swayed away from your principles by your useless husband's pampering. You never had real pluck. And now that your whole puerile life has arrived on my desk, I go berserk. As metaphor, my lady, you're not worth a fuck. Inscription in her journal, she lived then in the castle of the Good Hope. And when ships came in, they brought letters from families and newspapers, etc., and you can send something back to your families. From the ship anchoring to the side, I hastily prepare parcels and letters. The coming and going of ships, high-ranking officers' movements lie like an umbilical cord to the castle. Sweeping my eye across Table Bay has become second nature, and the thrill of locking my door and slowly, mouthful by mouthful, tasting the post, the latest newspapers, letters, the written word, the only harbor of the traveling heart. But then the smell hits us, unearthly, so putrid, it seems the most primordial of stenches. It's coming from the bay, says the cook. But by midday, everyone knows. A slave ship is unlawfully looking to put to land 609 Congolese. My husband suspects the hold is underwater. A few have drowned. Rice, nuts, manioc is finished, and the obviously greedy upstart captain of the ship implies that Governor Young planned it all, while he apparently hissed, "Did you have to hang this maggot's nest for all and sundry at the Cape to see?" But why does it smell so? Annie, in the ship, this is my stolid husband, they are lying row upon row, packed, shackled, to form filthy strings, shelf upon shelf. The doctor does not dare go down because of diarrhea, heat, stench, and the deck deadly slippery from mucus and blood. I turn the dessert spoon over and over on the tablecloth. Silver, expensively heavy, and catch myself for days staring from every window at the doomed ship in the bay. At dusk, a lament drifts towards the castle, a kind of howl, sobbing from that abdomen of that pleading cargo of misery. Through my telescope, I see on the deck shackled groups swaying to and fro in a macabre treaty against death. A shoal of Finns circling the ship, waiting for the stiff tussle of bodies cut loose every morning and thrown overboard. After I had seen that, for many days, my brain rushed forth with a dim, undetermined sense of unknown modes of suffering. In my thoughts was a darkness, call it solitude, a blank desertion. No familiar shapes of trees, of sea or sky, no colors of green fields, but huge and mighty forms that do not live like living men, moved slowly through my mind by day and with the trouble of my dreams. Haunt me like a fever. There's poems about the first state of emergency in South Africa, about the second state of emergency in South Africa. So the bard that writes about Lady Anne has to account in her own way for the things that are happening in her own life. And how do you write? How do you hold yourself as a poet and as a privileged white person accountable in that time? So Lady Anne then goes back to the, you see. Sorry, I'm just trying to get the right poem. She goes, they go back to England, and then her husband gets a job to come back to Cape Town. She is very anxious because they don't have money that she can go back with him, so he has to go alone. But I want to conclude the bard's story with a poem about the soulfish. And the soulfish is in Afrikaans we call it a tonguefish, but the soul is born like this. It moves down to the bottom because it gets eaten. So to escape being eaten, it moves down. The one part becomes the other part. The one eye moves from the one side to the upper side. The mouth changes. The upper side then becomes darkened, and so that fish then survives on the bottom because it has adapted. So I have written a poem about my children and this image of the soulfish, which Lady Anne for the first time describes in one of her diaries. The light over my desk streams into darkness. I await my visitors on paper, my 4 children, finely balanced between anal and dorsal, tiny fins at the throat, constantly stirring, their eyes uncommonly soft. In the shallow brackish water, your mother treads clay with the metaphors. Come here across dictionaries and blank pages. How I love this delicate little school, these fish of mine in their 4-strong flotilla, lured so close now. What should I feed you? Dear child of the lean flank, yield to the seabed. Yes, the stretching makes you ache, but mother holds you to her. Mother is here. The eye beneath, like father's wondrous blue, migrates cautiously with a complex bunching of nerve and muscle till it's up beside the other. Pert little mouth almost pulled out of shape. With time the tongue will settle in its groove. Pigment of the upper flank begin to darken. Unobtrusive between sand and stone you lie, meshed with bedrock, and never again to pray or take flight. I press my mouth against each distended face. Mother knows you will survive the tide. Lady Anne lets her husband then go alone, and she worries about him. She writes a letter from London. Where will this letter find you, best beloved? If I could choose again, I would not have you return you to the Cape. May fair winds attend you and blow you back soon. I travel everywhere with a small picture of your face. At times your eyes look saddened, and I think about you in the warm Cape, and memories of that mountain, that 7-foot people percolate up, and how I took all the wrong tubes of watercolor. Oh, how I misjudged that brutal and blissful light. Look after yourself. I miss you. My days are ailing without you. He writes back, I shudder when I think what space there is between us. Pray for me sometimes, dearest love. I never fail to do so for you. Andrew Barnard. And then, of course, he dies there, and she gets the message. The 6 walnut trees in pots and my hands dirty when the message came. But how could it be? I had a letter yesterday. How can it be? How can it be that that day passed over me as if it was any other day? That I sleep, have tea, laugh and potter while half of me is already dead. The slave brought me a handful of relics that they found with your body. A locket with my hair, the green purse I knitted for you, your medicine. You died of fever, says the slave, near Stellenbosch. The doctor from the Cape was too late. There was no one with you. You were buried on the road to Greenpoint, a small funeral, and went from the sea. Tonight, everything speaks through the dead towards me. Your brittle bundle of bones, my longest loved beloved, lies lonely and longingly cradled somewhere lost and lean. I'm overwhelmingly awake tonight. Of me so little has become. You are all I had in this world, beloved deathling. Alone and cold it is behind my ribs. Africa had me giving up all. It is so dark. It is so bleak. Soft, beloved taunter, of me so little has become. I'm down to my last skin. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Lanoye. I'm an area specialist here in the African and Middle Eastern Division, and I work with the Southern African countries. And it's my honor to be here today to converse with, I've been practicing Antjie Krog. I studied Afrikaans for a while, years and years ago. Oh, yes. So, for those of you who don't know much about the library, I would just like to tell you that we have a vast collection of research material about and from the African continent. And within that, there's an amazing amount from and about South Africa in all formats. So newspapers, government publications, films, all topics, education, development, literature, poetry, drama. And in the 9 official languages of South Africa, such as Afrikaans, so the first language of our speaker. We have quite a bit of her work in our collections. If you search our online catalog by keyword, there are at least 54 hits for monograph records about her. So to start off our question and answer period, I'll only ask 4 questions because I know that you have questions and I want to offer you my time. So I'll ask 4 questions. 2 we always ask, and then the other 2, I'll start off asking about Lady Anne, which was first published in 1989 and was recently republished by Bucknell University Press. The first time a complete volume of poetry of yours has been translated from Afrikaans into English. So I'm wondering if you could tell us how you used Lady Anne as a metaphor to talk about social issues of the 1980s, and how do the present English poems speak to continuing issues of power, class, privilege, and racial injustice that disfigure our world?
Thank you. It's such an honor, and when I hear the list of African writers that have been here, I really go on my knee. Lady, at the end of the 80s, that was before the release of Nelson Mandela and the unbanning of the ANC, the issue was the discrepancy, the difference between white and black, rich and poor, and the whites were rich and the black were poor. So the volume is obsessed with how do you deal with the white stain of privilege. So I tried to use her, I think, to deal with that, and I abuse her. I appropriate her, which, if she was black or if she was not white and royalty, would have been a problem. But since the British killed so many Afrikaners during the Anglo-Boer War, I felt it's okay if I appropriate her. So I didn't feel too bad when people say, yes, and that is how but then Nelson Mandela happened. And I was a bit ashamed of this volume because it was talking about these stark issues. And here was this unbelievably wonderful, forgiving period. But when I translated them now, yeah, I realized, no, it was just a pause. It was a wonderful pause in the history of South Africa. But we're still at that point, and that issue will now be brought out.
Thank you. I'd like to ask you something about language, which is a very sensitive issue everywhere. I was told that you are passionately committed to the indigenous languages. So I'm wondering what that means. South Africa has 9 official languages, and most, it appears to me, in written form are not thriving. So are they endangered? At one point, our division had to be quite selective in what we acquired in Afrikaans, because there was really so much material that was coming. Now it's less and less. And I'm wondering if it appears that way to you too, that there's less Afrikaans literature that's being produced. So my question is Afrikaans endangered? Afrikaans literature, is it endangered?
Okay, let me just divert to the favorite part of your question, then I'll come to the second part. The University of Western Cape is currently overseeing a large project. It received money from the National Institute of Humanities Research to translate classical text from indigenous languages into English. And the classical texts have been identified by scholars in those various languages. So 2 novels from Xhosa by Samuel Edward Krug famous texts that Thabo Mbeki, the president, constantly quoted from, but 90% of the people, even people who speak Sesotho, didn't necessarily read Lanoye. So those 2 novels are being translated. There's 2 novels in isiZulu, also a classical one by Vilakazi Nomanini, and then another one that is more current about the fight between the IFP and the ANC. Then a wonderful, wonderful thriller of a novel in Sepedi, another novel in Sesotho, a play in Sesotho, and then an anthology of poems from those languages. And what all those texts have in common is whiteness are either at the back of it, or it's encroaching, or it is already eroding. So it's African intellectuals who were educated, who could write well, who have read, and were then responding, I want to say, to the black ear of that language. You see, there was a strange time in South Africa where you could feel that people were writing for the white ear. There's many explanations and this is so it's absolutely fantastic text. So I will make sure that a list of all of them are being sent here when it is published.
Thank you.
The university will make sure of that. Afrikaans was for many years the only language with English. It had, and now who supports English? English is supported with the world. So a government need not support English. So the apartheid state supported Afrikaans. The dictionaries were excellent. We had our own newspapers. We have 2 or 3 publishing houses. We have our own universities, etc. Now that had changed after 1994 because the table now has to be shared with the 9 indigenous languages. And that has had several consequences. Well, maybe we publish less, but I think what is being written in Afrikaans is very, very interesting. It's there are voices, because Afrikaans, 60% of Afrikaans speakers are not white. It's in South Africa they would be termed coloured.
Yeah.
Here, I'm not sure what, but so they speak Afrikaans, they're not white, and they write from other areas, from another background, and there's unbelievable material coming from that.
Okay, thank you. To get to the 2 questions that relate to African literature in general, I would like to know who your favorite new South African poets and writers are, and what do you think makes their work distinctly African?
Sure, there are many, but let me just start with what comes first into mind. There's a young poetess, but we all prefer the word poet. She just did her own thing. She performed, Kuleka Putuma. But so effectively, and so she had built up such a fan base, and she didn't mind that she was not published or whatever. And then one day someone heard her and contacted her and said, anyone published it? No. So he has published her. It's a small, tiny press that get money to publish only poetry. And before the book came out, there were already 2,000 orders.
And that press is? That's okay.
It's okay. Her name is Kuleka Putuma, and she is an oral performer, but who also, of course, writes. And she is bringing a non-easy remembering of the past. So it's not always that the past was perfect or the past was just bad. It's a very complexity that she brings in. Then we have wonderful rappers. And in what we've managed, in English, rappers and poets of the word are one side, and the other side are poets of the page and poets of the stage. It's a very big division. But in Afrikaans, we've managed to keep everybody embraced. And so there are some wonderful rappers in Afrikaans. There's one called Jetsvanger. He's a tall guy, and it just pumps out unbelievable. Yeah. Yes, we have. But I can go on. But there's wonderful young black students who now are at top universities, are writing their experience of being trapped in this also privilege and don't feel easy about it. Feel in one way they earn it, and in another way they can't live with it.
Oh, okay. Okay, lastly, what do you think is the future for African literary writers, both diasporic and from the continent? And what steps need to be taken to bring more recognition from the international community?
I once asked a big conference of publishing, who is English language spies? Who goes out and sees this book needs to be translated into English? And they looked at me and said, they will find us, suggesting that good books will be translated into English. It's not necessary to go out there and find them. I think that's one of the problems, that people who buy books or advertise books or don't go out to look what is available in indigenous languages as well as in English. And at least these texts that are now being translated, but I think of so many other books from South Africa, like Shaka by Thomas Mafolo, The Rich Man from Peter Maritzburg. The only two books that have been written in an indigenous language that have been classified as the top 100 books written by Africans in the 20th century. That is actually a fantastic list. And what most of those books have in common, I think, is there's another ontology. The world is bankrupt. Hey? The whole issue of humanity is bankrupt, mostly in the world. And from that continent comes text that provides an alternative to that. It's not necessarily respected because in many ways the world kneels down to individualism, to capitalism, to richness and all of that. And here is it's a completely other way of looking at life and at nature and at the cosmos that I think people are starving for.
Wow. Thank you. I've had my turn. Now, would you like to ask a question? Okay.
Yes, thank you very much for your readings. I'm curious about the writing that is done in Afrikaans by the Afrikaners. Does it reflect some kind of nostalgia for the past? Does it embrace the present? or is it used by the Afrikaners as a resistance to the present?
Oh, that's such a good question, and difficult to answer, because what I'm saying now is for Afrikaans, but also in a strange way for English. We all still live apart. So if you write about now, that book would seem, could have been written 20 years ago. So most people write about the past. They're now revisiting the past. Because that's a part of South Africa that we all understand well. So everyone can read it and everyone understands. There's one Afrikaans writer that writes about now. He has married a black woman and he lives in Hillbrow in Johannesburg. And he keeps a diary and he writes just about what they do. I think he's an editor somewhere. And that is the closest I have come in my language to read about a mixed society, but that it's presented as normal. There's no other writer. Sometimes people will imagine a place where, but then it doesn't work, it gels. If you write and you write about black people, it's actually white people, but they're just black skins, which then creates another kind of problem. What I found very interesting is the most famous writer from South Africa is Dion Meyer. He's a crime writer, but he's regarded as one of the best in the world. His last book was a futuristic book, taking place in South Africa. But because he took a jump of 30, 40 years, he could bring in black people, colored people, white people, bring them all in under a crisis, with them, with their past, but he could then imagine them working together. And that's sort of the only remarkable effort that has come from about now. I wouldn't say it's because people resist the present by writing. People resist the present by living.
I have so many questions. That is excellent. I also wanted to say that the book you were mentioning is Collective Amnesia.
Yes.
And the library has a copy of it. It's very good.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, please check it out. But I wanted to ask you about, not to get too personal, but I wanted to ask you about the idea of translation as being perhaps a negative political act. If we're rushing to translate things into English, are we losing their original intent? Are we losing the indigenous languages? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Because it does seem as though there's more being published in the indigenous languages, and it's such an exciting thing. Should those be translated for our consumption?
My personal obsession with translation is when I close my eyes and I listen to what I call the South African sound. This is all the literature, all the poems, all of it. Then there's this absence of work done in the indigenous languages. Afrikaans is there, and why are we there? Because we are being translated. And no one was interested in translating Afrikaans during apartheid because you had power, you didn't care. Since 1994, Afrikaans writers care. The publishers are not interested in having you published. Every single writer pays someone to publish her or him into English. And you become part. That's how you enter, and now you're part of the sound, of the imagery, of the stories of the South African. But all my life I've been aware that, initially just of poetry, but the older I got, about novels that exist in these languages that you can't buy anymore because they're out of print, no one reads them. There's also another problem that most of these indigenous novels have been written in what they call classical Xhosa, classical Zulu. And now the young people can't read there. There's also many of the young black students who go to Model C schools where they learn no indigenous language and can't read that. But so this translations would bring those voices back and maybe create reattention that, okay, let's go there and see how badly this is translated, you know, or how truthfully this has been translated. So for me, translation is an act of reconciliation. It's a way of reaching each other, because we have to have, at one stage, write a book in which we can imagine each other. We can't now because there's these absences. And what I love actually most is that there's a lot of suspicion against these early black intellectuals, that they sold out, they were under the influence of missionaries, all of kinds of stuff. You don't really need to know what they say because they are tainted. Yeah, and when you read it's not so, right? And the quality of articulation and of argumentation is just unbelievable. The kinds of descriptions and things that it evokes. So so it's an important issue for me, and I think maybe that is the saving grace of English. So many other worlds enter it. And if a country decides not to buy works translated from Chinese, or I don't read works from the East, sometimes I feel, white and black in my lifetime is more than enough. You know, I can't accommodate, you. Yeah, and it's wrong, right? It's wrong. We need to take it all up in.
I read the very first poem you wrote as a girl, Scandalized the Committee, brought a praise to your house. Does anything you write now still scandalize?
Yeah, you know, sometimes I feel I could have died at 18 because actually I already did what I should have done with my life. It's difficult nowadays to scandal anything because we live with other kinds of scandals. But the last one that I did survive, I wrote a volume on the aging female body. And I was asking a very good photographer, do you know of any photograph of an old woman's body that is not disgusting? And he said to me, no, but he can't get older women to pose for him. So I said, okay, I have a friend, I will ask her. And she then said yes. So David Goldblatt went and took an unbelievably beautiful, and it's not Photoshop, ne? It's only all the marks, and then old hand and breast, all this old woman. So that was then on the cover of that volume. Its title was Body Bereft. Oh my goodness. So then the shops didn't want to put it on their shelves. Someone said to me, how can I give a volume with this on the front cover for my father? Someone else said to me, I bought it but I was too ashamed to read it on the plane. Because it's also a white old woman's body. So now, I think if it was a black old woman's body, people would feel it's a political act to read. But now no one cares about an old white woman's body. It also didn't sell well, although it's a very good volume. But for me it meant a lot that it created that people realize how actually discriminatory one is towards the older body. I may add, there's a website, someone referred me to a website of sex between old people, and that is truly disgusting.
I'll let you go first.
I noticed that I happen to be cataloging I noticed that lots of books were simultaneously published in South Africa, in Afrikaans and in English. So it's not, and then I don't know whether the original is Afrikaans or in English, you know. And so that is, to me, Afrikaans is not dying. It's still there. And also, one thing is that I'm a Harry Potter fan. And accidentally, I ordered a book that is in Afrikaans. So it was translated from English to Afrikaans. So it means that still a lot of people read Afrikaans.
Yeah, there's a lot of readers, and the best book buyers are Afrikaans-speaking people. Initially, exclusive books, the main book entity in South Africa, removed after 1990. It was politically of 94, it was politically incorrect to have Afrikaans, so they removed the shelf. And in the end, they had to put it back because they say Afrikaans speakers come in looking for their books in their language. But they most often then buy also other books or buy only English books. But they don't come into your shop if you don't have a shop. So that was it. The reason why Afrikaans is under threat at this stage is there was one university left who taught an Afrikaans up until all the, you could do everything in Afrikaans. And they have decided to step away from that they want to be South African university. They want, they want to appoint lecturers and so on that speaks English and so on. And that it means that the third tier function of that language is now completely under threat because people why would you go to a high school in Afrikaans if your university is now English? So that is, I want to say it has become so strange, this translation between, that some people have written books in English and then the publishing house would say, but this is actually an Afrikaans story. Let us translate it in Afrikaans because then you sell more. So because the Afrikaans speakers buy that and then suddenly also, you have English speakers. So there are some, the False River is one famous, that was written in English, but it was such a free state story that it was translated into Afrikaans by the writer.
Yeah, I have two very brief questions, and one of them actually relates to an earlier question that Eve asked. If I recall right, there was a comment or a review that you did recently. I think it was on Andrew Green's Rights of Desire, where you were making a statement along the lines that there was this trend in South African writing, some kind of bandwagon where people were jumping into, consisting of stories about crime, fearful whites, black pathologists, basically precisely because these were stories that sort of sold, they were commercially very successful subjects to sort of engage. So I was wondering if that is still a trend, or if you made that comment or not, or if you see that as a trend that still sort of characterizes writing in South Africa, particularly among the Afrikaans communities. And secondly, since I'm interested in film, and your Country of My Skull was adapted onto the screen, what is your relationship with South African filmmakers?
There's a deep awareness, let me say before 1994, the writing was pessimistic, unrealistic, that the moment blacks will take over, this will be the end, and this is what will happen. It will just be chaos and mayhem and desert. I have to say, since 1990, and especially with people like Nelson Mandela and his first cabinet, people were especially Afrikaans writers, were turning to the back, turning to their past to find black characters that meant something for them. And there's a sleuth, I think you call it a wave of literature about some black man or some good person in the past who has affected. And you must remember, many white children have been brought up by black women. And so there's a whole new movement of trying to find her. You only knew her white name. Where is she? And some people have found their children of that person and have reconnected, etc. Find photographs. There's a website where you can post photographs of you and the black woman and ask whether anyone knows anything about her. So I think there's a desire to redefine oneself, and redefine oneself as a profoundly South African person, and not as a European spirit. Yeah. And the problem is, with things going so bad currently, politically and economically, etc., so many of these texts that spelled out this is how it's going to be are now shimmering under the surface to be resurrected. I have no relation with South African filmmakers, although Afrikaners make 35 full-length films a year. That's more than 2 a month. I don't know where they get them. They are mostly all bad. But this is an industry that creates a lot of jobs, etc. And then there's a television station with 3 channels that is in Afrikaans. And all of them must include, I mean, if I want to look at now, if I find something now, it's on television. Completely, bizarre, but a black owner with a coffee shop, and then white young kids would work for her and listen to her, and accept her as a mum and their mum and so on. So that you find that on TV, not yet in novels. You also find in visual art and in music, there's a lot of cross-fertilization.
We should wrap things up now. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for coming. It's been a very, I think, intriguing session here today. Things I've never thought about, never knew. I just think that this was very good for all of us, quite informative. So thank you very much. If you have questions that you'd like to ask, we invite you to come in the back to our conference room, and you can ask questions. We also have copies of Lady Anne for sale in our conference room, and we would welcome your coming back. So thank you very much. Thank you.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.